So we want to welcome Nick to our beginning farm and rancher subgroup meeting. Nick is with the National, say it for me, Nick. Sorry, so I don't
Yeah,
boggle
the
it.
the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition.
And you do ag appropriations research and lead that stuff with them. So we were really happy to have you here to kind of share with the network around what you're learning and what's coming up for ag appropriations in 2026. And I'm going to make you a co-host right here. There you go.
Sweet.
And
All
welcome,
right.
folks. We're just doing introductions in the chat.
All right. Let me just try and make sure I'm doing this right. All right. Are you all able to see that?
It looks
Can
like
you guys
it's,
see
yep.
my slides here? Okay,
Yeah.
sweet. All right. And how do I start this? My apologies. Give me one moment. All right, cool. Well, thank you all for joining. My name is Nick Rossi. I'm a policy specialist with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. I cover our appropriations work as well as ag research, organics, and some beginning and underserved farmer work as well. So, kind of like the safety net at NSAC, kind of all the different things that don't fit neatly into a box, I handle. Um, a little bit about NSAC. We are a grassroots alliance of, I think, now getting close to about 180 member organizations from all across the country. We have several members in Oregon and a good amount of folks on the West Coast in general. This has actually been one of our biggest years for folks joining the coalition, which has been really great to see. I think we've had almost 20 to 30 groups join just in the past year or two. So we've been growing pretty rapidly, which has been great to see, and I think speaks to a lot of folks wanting to get more involved. Um, just kind of a little bit about how we work. So farmers themselves are not members of NSEC, but the organizations that serve farmers are. So generally, kind of the way that we develop our policy and our appropriations priority is what you see in front of you. Farmers and other stakeholders kind of share what they're seeing on the ground, what's working, what's not. Our members collect a lot of that information and then share that with NSEC. NSEC then kind of works to figure out like what can we fix and how can we fix it? Is that something we can work directly with USDA on? Is that something that we need to do in the Farm Bill? Is that something we can work on with appropriations? And then we bring NSEC itself does a lot of work with USDA members of Congress, and then kind of like we were talking about at the very beginning of this, we bring our members into DC um, and their farmers to work with Congress to kind of get our priorities in front and to improve federal food and farm policy. So just a little like a quick approps 101. So, you know, NSEC does not work on elections. We're a nonpartisan organization. But moving on to the next step, authorization, that would be what the Farm Bill falls under. So the Farm Bill is what can authorize programs. It's what creates programs. It's what gets rid of programs and how you change kind of like the priorities of different programs. The appropriations process is how a lot of those programs get funded. So in the Farm Bill, a program like SARE, for example, the Sustainable Ag Research and Education Program, gets authorized, and it can be authorized it is currently authorized up to $60 million. So that does not mean that it gets $60 million every single year. That means that it can get up to $60 million. So every single year, Congress works on appropriations, and that is determining the funding levels for different programs. So in theory, uh, while the Farm Bill is supposed to take about every 5 years, I think we're at 8 right now, appropriations is supposed to happen every single year. Um, and that is why we saw the government shut down not too long ago. That is Congress failing to pass an appropriations package, meaning that the government goes unfunded and shuts down. So we authorize programs in the Farm Bill. We decide on the funding levels for programs through the appropriations process. The appropriations process is a different committee. So you have like the Ag Committee in both the Senate and the House. There's a separate committee. There's an Ag Appropriations Committee. So the Ag Appropriations Committee in the House and the Ag Appropriations in the Senate both work on their own funding levels, and then they come together to decide what those funding levels are. Historically speaking, the appropriations process kicks off every single year usually beginning to mid-February with the publishing of the presidential budget report. That is the president's office putting forward a pretty large package saying these are the funding levels that we want for different programs, and this is why. Um, that is a little delayed this year. It's been a little delayed the past couple of years. So we're expecting the presidential budget report to come out probably early to mid-March. And that is really the signal to the House Agapropes and the Senate Agapropes that things are starting to kick off. We can move forward a little bit. So one of the things that Andrew flagged is the appropriations chart that NSAC puts together every single year. So we have this appropriations chart. That's not what you see in front of us. This is like a very condensed version of that appropriations chart. Our appropriations chart covers, I think, almost 40 programs within USDA, and we show funding. I mean, we have those going back until like 1998, I think. And so we show what's in the presidential budget report, what are the numbers that the House Ag Appropriations Committee puts forward? What are the numbers that the Senate Ag Committee puts forward? And then what is the final number that becomes law? Um, so what I have in front of you is kind of NSAC's top appropriations priorities. So the highlighted section is the current funding levels for these programs that NSAC really focuses on. You see farming opportunities, training, and outreach. That number says zero. That is because Photo receives what we call mandatory funding. So in the Farm Bill, they can't say there's mandatory funding, which means that it automatically gets a certain amount of funding every single year. So there are certain programs that don't have mandatory funding, like SARE, for example, where we have to fight for that amount of funding every single year. Photo, which includes the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program, as well as 2501, which is the outreach and assistance to socially disadvantaged farmers program, receives 50 million in mandatory funding every single year, and that's split evenly between the two programs. They each get 25 million. And then NSAC advocates for more funding on top of that 50 million that's already guaranteed every single year. You can see the House mark for FY26 and then the Senate mark at the very end for FY26. Generally, the Senate mark, and this has been true for as long as I've been working in NSAC the past 5 or 6 years, the Senate mark is generally the one that we support. Those numbers are usually a lot higher for our priorities. And we focus a lot of our work on the Senate Ag Appropriations Committee to try and get those numbers up there. So Senate is oftentimes much higher, the House is lower, and then they oftentimes kind of meet in the middle. You might notice the very top one, conservation technical assistance, is lower than both the House mark and the Senate mark, which is kind of unusual. Um, the reason for that is because of the pretty massive layoffs we saw at USDA. There is significantly less local and state NRCS staff. And the justification the Appropriations Committee gave us was that there's just not enough staff to implement a lot of that conservation technical assistance. And so they slashed the funding for this year pretty significantly. Um, I'm going to keep moving. I just kind of wanted to get through all of this. I'm happy to answer, more questions about any of these slides at the end. I'm happy to talk about Farm Bill, anything else that's going on. So this year, this coming fiscal year, FY27, here are the funding levels for NSAC for our top level priorities. So I think since its inception back in 1998, appropriations, and that's why I've been talking about SARE so much, appropriations has been a top priority. Our SARE funding has been a top priority for NSAC in the appropriations process. SARE is authorized up to 60 million. It's never received its full 60 million. It's generally been between 48 to 50 for the past couple of years, and we've actually seen funding cuts in some of the previous fiscal years. So we took it as kind of a win in FY26 when we got level funding. Doesn't really feel like a win, but I think given the kind of like the environment, we were happy to see that at least. Um, the second one, as I was saying, was conservation technical assistance. We're asking for a pretty significant bump up in conservation technical assistance, almost $300 million. And a carve out of that is 30 million for the Grazing Lands Conservation Initiative. This kind of goes in part with the bullet point that you see at the bottom. One of the things that we've been trying to work on with US, so I think since last January, there's been about 18,000 layoffs or deferred resignations at USDA. This has significantly been mostly at NRCS, FSA, and rural development. Most of this are staff out in states. This is not mostly DC staff, our federal employees located in DC. So we are hoping, and we've got pretty good support behind us this year, that we're trying to get some additional funding in the appropriations bill with Congress directing USDA to rapidly hire and onboard staff at the local and state level in NRCS FSA and rural development. The third one is the Office of Urban Agriculture Innovative Production Grants. There's several of the offices of urban agriculture located across the United States. That program started in the 2018 Farm Bill, and it does not only serve urban agriculture. There is a lot of this funding also goes to rural communities as well. It's kind of a misnomer. The fourth one, which we already talked about, is the Farming Opportunities Training and Outreach Program. We're asking for 10 million additional dollars on top of that 50 million in mandatory, split evenly between 2501 and BFRDP. The next one is the local, oh my God, I should get better with my acronyms. The Local Agriculture Marketing Program. There we go. Thank you. We're asking for 20 million. So the Local Agriculture Marketing Program is a combination of a few different programs, including the Value Added Producer Grants and the Farmers Market Promotion Program and the Local Foods Promotion Program. So split appropriately between the two. The FML FPP generally receives more funding than VAPG, and LAMP is another one of those programs where there's already some mandatory funding there. I think there's 50 million in mandatory funding there as well. That was kind of one of the, and this is maybe going into too much detail. In the 2018 Farm Bill, we had this kind of like tiny but mighty programs. And if you're able to get program funding to a certain level, it becomes mandatory funding. So we work to combine VAPG, FMPP, and LFPP all together with under the LAMP umbrella to guarantee mandatory funding. And so now we're trying to get additional funding for that program. The last one is the Organic Transitions Program. This is a research program that is actually available both to universities, generally the land-grant colleges, but also nonprofit organizations as well can apply for Organic Transitions Program funding. Um, and then we've talked a little bit about that USDA staffing one as well. There's kind of two routes that you can do in the appropriations process. One is, the funding level, getting additional funding that is legally binding when that bill is passed. USDA has to comply with that. The other half of that is called report language. Report language is not legally binding, but it is something that the Senate or the House can include in an appropriations bill that directs USDA or other agencies to act in a certain way. It's not legally binding, but it is something that USDA is supposed to comply with. And uh, you can kind of make them feel bad for not doing it. There can be some pressure from Congress on that front. And it is kind of important for kind of keeping a record. So showing the intent of Congress when they pass an appropriations bill versus what USDA has chosen to do. So FY27 appropriations, like we were talking about a little bit earlier, theoretically starts kind of right now. It's probably going to start sometime between now and mid-March. That's going to be the presidential budget report. The next step is that the members of the House Ag Appropriations Committee and the Senate Ag Appropriations Committee put out appropriations request forms, and each office sets their own personal deadline for when those forms have to be completed. It really sucks. They all have different types of forms, they all have different deadlines for when they want them, and NSEC tries to get one to every single ag appropriator. And we do that with our members as well. So NSAC supports all of our members in filling out a lot of these appropriations forms to folks in their state or district. The next step would be developing the House mark and the Senate mark. That generally happens sometime in June or July. And then an appropriations bill has to pass by the end of the current fiscal year, which is in theory September 30th. So when we get to September 30th, there's kind of two paths. You have a new FY27 government funding bill. We get that end of September. There's an opportunity to increase a lot of the funding for the programs that we support. There's that report language that I talked about, some of the USDA staffing options, and then something called policy riders, which I might get into a little bit later, but we don't need to cover that right now. Generally, what has happened in the past couple of years and what we expect likely to happen this year is what we call a continuing resolution. Path of least resistance, that just means that it's a continuation of the current funding level. So the FY26 funding levels that we have right now, if Congress passes a continuing resolution by the end of September, those will just kind of continue until the end of the continuing resolution. The continuing resolution generally lasts until the end of December, but sometimes they have had longer ones. So the reason that we saw that government shutdown last year was because Congress was unable to pass a new bill or pass a continuing resolution. And so we saw one of the longest shutdowns I think the longest shutdown in history of the US government. And then there was kind of some weird things that happened. So generally, appropriations is passed as like one big bill we call an omnibus. That is like the agriculture appropriations bill, the judiciary appropriations bill. That's like every single government funding bill usually all passes as one bill together, and then that's what moves forward. This year, we saw what we call a minibus. So they combined the ag appropriations bill, the legislative branch appropriations bill, and then one other I can't remember off the top of my head. Those were the first three to pass. And that's what we also saw. We almost saw another government shutdown in January because they were unable to reach an agreement on those other funding bills. But in that case, if the government were to shut down, all of the offices or agencies that have already passed their funding bill would not shut down. So we passed the agriculture bill in December. That means we were good to go for another year. If the government had shut down again in January, USDA would remain open. So it's very likely that we're going to see another continuing resolution in September this year. And that's for a handful of reasons. I think really the biggest one is the elections coming up in November. We have a pretty significantly smaller congressional calendar this year. I think there's about 50 less days that members are in session than there were last year. And really in like June or July, most of the House is not really working on legislation anymore. They are working on running for office again. And so that kind of creates a lot of interesting opportunities for us. So we don't have to start with questions yet, but that was kind of like the slides that I wanted to give you all. Um, there are a few interesting things that are happening this year that we think provide opportunities for folks and stuff that you guys can participate in as well. So we talked about those forms that NSAC works on filling out along with our members to send to appropriators. You guys have a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Merkley, on one of the top ag appropriators. And he's been a really big champion for SARE, as well as a few other of our more kind of conservation focused appropriations requests. But also, every single member of Congress puts in a request. So if you have a senator that's not on AgApprops, or maybe the representative of your district is not on the House AgApprops committee, you can still talk to their office and say, these programs are really important to me. It'd be great if you gave them NSAC's funding levels, but of course, that's up to you. You can also just talk about how important certain programs are. And so every single member of Congress is going to put in that. There is the election coming up, which is really interesting. I think that we're going to see folks maybe committing to things and doing things that they wouldn't normally do if it was not an election year. So I think that there's a really good chance for some bipartisanship and getting a lot of NSAC's ass up in the coming both Senate and House mark. I think that I've been talking for a while, so I can stop there. I hit you with like a ton of information. The appropriations process is like the least glamorous of all policy, and also the most confusing one. So I hope I did a decent job trying to explain that at the beginning. But I'll pause. Happy to answer questions for folks related to the appropriations process. If you're interested in getting a little more involved with that, I can talk about that. I can talk about policy riders. They're kind of weird, but I'm happy to. And then also like anything Farm Bill related or USDA in general that you guys have questions about. I'm happy to spend some time talking.
Very helpful. That I learned a lot from that. Nix, thank you for clarifying that appropriations process. The big one that comes to my mind, and you may not be able to answer this. There's a couple of or many organizations in Oregon who have relied on programs like BFRDP in Farm Bill, and you, a couple of them closed out in September of 2025, and we've been, waiting for an announcement on. So these are appropriated, and funding levels have continued at the with the Farm Bill continuation, or there's funding supposedly there, but we're not seeing anything out there, no opportunities. Can you kind of maybe speak to what you all learned or understand of, is it just USDA staffing? Are they dragging their feet? What's going on with that?
Yeah, oof, that's a big one.
Yeah.
So I specifically work on BFRDP in 2501. And yeah, things have been really bad at NIFA the past year or two. We saw several BFRDP grant terminations, just outright USDA terminating already existing grants. Right, we didn't see a request for applications for the past fiscal year, which is a thing that they are technically allowed to do. It's called what is it? A one 2 year no year funding. So oftentimes you do see delays in requests for applications when there's a change in administration, like things generally slow down. It is kind of unusual that they did not open up any requests for applications for the previous cycle. And so I think that, and I'm trying not to be like, what's the word I'm looking for? Too doom and gloom about it. I think that USDA is trying to get creative with how they can manipulate BFRDP in 2501. I think that we've seen a pretty significant attack from the administration on underserved farmers, and 2501 is one of the only programs that has that codified. So they can't really like just say we're not going to serve those folks anymore. They are legally obligated to serve those folks. Um, and BFRDP also has a tendency to do a lot of work with underserved farmers as well as beginning farmers. I mean, beginning farmers technically fall under the umbrella of underserved farmers. So my answer is no. I don't really have any idea what's going on there. I think that what I keep hearing from NIFA is that we're likely to see those applications come out mid-spring. They've pushed that back several times. Right now, I'm hearing mid-spring. I think that the RFAs are going to look pretty significantly different than they have in past years, and we really don't have an idea of what those changes are going to be. I think another one of the likely possibilities is that there's going to be a significantly shorter window to apply to those programs. Generally, you have 30 to 90 days. What we've seen them do with other programs is like 2 weeks, and then the window is shut. Um, so I would say, if you're looking to apply to those programs, look at the RFA from last year. I mean, get your application as close as you can. And then when that RFA comes out, make the changes that you need to based off of that and get that in. Because I think there's very likely to be a pretty short application window this year. Um, and I mean, we have not gotten any type of certainty from USDA or NIFA. NIFA is the agency that runs BFRDP and now 2501. 2501 was moved into NIFA last year. That they've finished grant terminations. I think that it's likely that we'll continue to see existing grants continue to be reviewed and potentially terminated. We haven't heard of any in the past month or two, but I think that they have not said to me when I've asked directly, is this over? Yes. So I think that they are still looking at that. Um, did that cover all of the parts of the question there?
Yeah, that was really helpful. That's more than I've heard, gotten uh, information than I've heard from other folks. So that's really helpful. Let's open it up to the group here. I do see Sophie saying that Senator Merkley is really supportive with SARE stuff. And yeah, Heidi.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for that overview. That was, yeah, really helpful to just look at all the programs happening. Um, any updates? So I work in the Portland area, and Portland was one of like the pilot service centers and had like for an urban ag center and had an FSA, an NRCS person, and now, yeah, they're not there anymore. Um, Any insight on support for urban ag? Um, yeah, or no support for urban ag in.
Yeah, I think that's so. I was talking to we have some members from Detroit, which is also one of the centers for the Office of Rural Agriculture. And they said kind of the same thing a couple of months ago. The folks that they were working with at NRCS and FSA just like disappeared. And they did not hear from them for several months. I think they said like a month ago that they started getting in, like folks from NRCS and FSA started getting in contact with them again. But I think that's pretty like regionally specific. I don't like, I mean, there is no plans at USDA as of right now to hire on more staff. And we are going to see there's the USDA reorganization plan, which is a whole other thing that we're tracking. And that is going to really kick off in earnest come summertime. And that is going to be the relocation of a significant amount of USDA employees out of DC to we don't know where at this point, but also probably consolidation of offices across the country as well. So I would say that one of the things that you can do and has been successful for some folks is it really depends on your representative, reaching out to your representative and getting them to talk to USDA, like having them call USDA and say, like, where is FSA and RCS? Why aren't they serving these people? Senators can do that as well. I think that that is like the most successful route that we've seen folks who are having trouble on the ground is getting a member of Congress to, you know, start talking about that. So I can't really give you a forecast of what might be coming, unfortunately, but in terms of some potential action there. And I will say one of the other things I forgot to mention with BFRDP and 2501 is that we're also working with Congress to try and do some oversight at USDA. The terminations, uh, I think that it's pretty bipartisan with Republicans and Democrats that they're really pissed off at USDA for how much staff they've laid off, as well as the terminations of grants we've seen. I mean, ag appropriators, you know, appropriate that money to be spent to serve, and then USDA just went outright and canceled it. So we're working on some bipartisan efforts right now to look at a lot of those RFAs that we have not seen open back up and try and get some oversight at USDA to figure out what's going on there. But that is in the works right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Nick? Y'all involved with the capital access, what was it? Access to capital markets, land, capital, and markets. Yeah. We had a couple folks in Oregon get that awarded, but I don't know if they ever actually got funding. Maybe you have an insight nationally on that one.
I do not have too much insight on that program. I'm part of like a just a informal chat of folks around the country with LCM grants. And it kind of just there we have no idea. Like, you know, contact with USDA has been in and out. A lot of folks just aren't being reimbursed or getting any funding at all. Um, I think that USDA is trying to figure out what they're going to do with that program. And I think they did terminate one of the LCM grants. I can't remember if I'm mixing those up now. But most of those are still at least in existence and the agreements are still there. And there is a bipartisan bill in the House that basically creates the LCM informally as kind of like a pilot program. It's called the New Producer Economic Security Act. Um, but I don't believe that that made that into the farm bill that the House just, or the version of the farm bill the House just released. So it's an ongoing effort on that front.
Yeah, I remember seeing something from small farmers on that. That's similar to what the new Producers Economic Security Act.
Mhm.
Cool. Does maybe someone in this group knows there was a bunch of LAMP applications in Oregon from this 2025 round, and I just went on their website and haven't seen any announcement. Have those been announced? Does anyone know? I'll have to ask around to those folks who applied.
Yeah, this is Amy at ODA. I don't believe they have.
Yeah,
Some of the partners we've been working with have not heard back about their applications.
yeah. That's late. Thanks, Amy. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Nick, thank you so much for all the information. It's really helpful. Matt Gordon with Oregon Farm Corps. We have a 2501 grant currently, and you mentioned being on a sort of informal group chat with some folks in another program. I was just wondering if you know if there's a similar thing for 2501 grantees. There's like a really messy email thread I'm part of, but it's like hundreds of people and most of them are non-responsive. I'm just like, if there's a 2501 version of that, I would love to be on it. I don't know if you know.
Not in the same way with the LCM one. I mean, a bunch of NSEC members do have um 2501 grants, and I think that trying to think of a good person to reach out to. Um what's his name? Andy, formerly of Eco Farm, out in California, has been looking at a lot of that 2501 stuff. I can't for the life of me remember what his last name is right now. But I
Oh,
can share that.
Andy Fisher.
Yes, Andy Fisher. Um,
Okay, yeah, I can find
so
his
if there was someone
contact.
who had kind of like an idea of what that's looking like, if that exists, I would shoot Andy an email.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
And I will say 2501 is a weird one. Because while they didn't open up an RFA for the previous fiscal year or last year, they did award applications. So they retroactively looked back at FY24 applications that didn't get funded and then handpicked some out and then funded those projects. Um, so technically that funding went out last year. Whereas like, so if BFRDP were to open up in the next month or two, that would be combined funding from last year where they didn't, and then this year. So we would see, in theory, more applications funded. With 2501, there would be just this year's funding. And so we don't know what projects they funded, and we don't know what the review process was yet. That usually is all published online, but they have not published that. So we put in a FOIA request to try and figure out where that funding went. It's very clearly just USDA handpicking applications that they want or like, and we don't know like what their criteria was or anything like that. So that is something that we're trying to look into right now.
That was for the 2025 2501.
Yeah, FY25 did see awards. What I heard was that they reached out to folks that applied in FY24, gave them like a week to say they wanted this funding and to update their application, and then they sent that funding out.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, thanks for that. That's really helpful. OSU Extension, y'all did an AFRI application. Did that get processed?
We haven't heard anything yet.
Was that the SAS ones are a different one? That's very
Yeah, I don't remember which because yeah, I know there were two AFRI options. I can't remember which one we put it under, but yeah, we haven't heard anything yet.
gotcha. I will say, one of the other things that is kind of new this year, for folks applying to NIFA grants is there's a new level of review. Um, I think that we're going to probably see this happen across other agencies as well. But at NIFA, like historically speaking, right, you send in your application, it's reviewed to see if it fits the criteria, and then it goes to like the people who apply to do like peer reviews, and then it gets approved by the program manager or the national program lead. What we've heard is that there's now a level of political review. So every single NIFA grant application that gets put forward has to be reviewed by a political appointee within NIFA or USDA REE. So that's like the undersecretary or like the undersecretary's policy advisor or like the director of NIFA. Um, so I think that I will say that when applying for NIFA grants to, be very precise with your language, knowing that there is an extra level of review that is happening there.
Yeah. Any thoughts or concerns that y'all are talking about with the kind of consolidated or refined contracting language that came out? Like, so there's like one now contract protocol. I forget but I saw that from USDA that they're making that like a unified contract language for across the USDA or something like that. Yep.
Right. Yeah. The USDA new terms and agreements.
Yeah, terms and agreements.
We don't, that's something that we are still looking at. I don't really
Yeah.
have a solid answer for you on that front yet. I think that like USDA is going to come out with their terms and agreements. And even though it's supposed to be this universally applied thing, it'll likely be interpreted and used differently by every single agency. Um, and I mean, I think, at the very worst, I think that it is USDA attempting to make it easier for them to terminate grants. Um, at the very best, they're trying to make it easier to apply to programs.
Yeah. Any other, Matt, do you have another question?
No, sorry.
No, you're good. Awesome. Well, yeah, Nick, thank you so much for taking the time. That was really helpful. And we'll share this with the network. And yeah, if you have other resources, if you want to have like a um, membership detail or anything like that, I'm happy to share that out with the network as well. Because y'all are in there getting some really important information out to folks who are doing the work on the ground and advocating for folks. So I think it's really important to share that out. So yeah, thank you so much. And you don't have to take any more of your time. You're busy. You got just came off your big events and stuff. So yeah, thank you so much for making time for us in Oregon.
Yeah, of course. No, appreciate you all attending. I apologize that that was probably a little bleak at the end. But I do think, what I mentioned at the beginning is that like we're seeing a huge increase in folks trying to be a part of NSAC. I think that really shows that there are folks around the country that really want to do this work and make a change and improve things. We still got, the Farm Bill is not passed yet, but we have, in the past year, like 16 or 17 bipartisan bills that we've worked on through our coalition that have been that have gone submitted, and several of those were included in the House Farm Bill markup. And like I said, we had one of our biggest meetings ever in DC. We had over 150 people. We met with 200 offices. I think, there is good things that are still happening. There's some good work that we're doing, and, we're going to keep doing that. You have, Andrew, feel free to give folks my email if, you have any more questions, and I can send over some stuff. The NSAG blog is like more information than you could ever want. We update that pretty regularly. So there'll be something that probably comes out on Friday or Monday that's kind of like a deep analysis, the House Farm Bill that just came out, if you really want to take a look at it. We also put out stuff on appropriations. Um, Sophie is also really great. Not to give Sophie more work, but she participates in a lot of the NSAC calls and has been really helpful with the appropriations work in the past. So um, feel free to shoot her an email too. Um, but thank you all very much for the time, and stay in touch.
Thanks, Nick.
All right,
Take care.
bye-bye.
Cool. Yeah, I found that to be very helpful. Hopefully y'all did. Um, we can do a little bit of quick programming updates if folks have things they want to share with the group and with the network. I've got the notes here. I forgot to share them out, but I can share those out with folks. And um, yeah, if anyone's got, I know Amy, you got a grant that's open. Oh, did she leave? Oh, okay. Gamey ODA has their farm to school infrastructure grant, right? I think is just opened up. So there's an opportunity for farmers and the network. Anything else interesting that folks are working on or want to share?
I'll just jump in. This is Nicole from the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District, and I have been absent from this group for quite a while. For a while, Tatiana
Taylor was representing for us, and I wanted to introduce Merrick Strand, who started with the district just a couple weeks ago and will be helping us serve beginning and new farmers in Washington County.
Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Nice to see some familiar names and faces on the roster here. So, yeah, I'm all of 3 weeks into the job. So, it's been a while since I've been plugged into the farming community, but glad to be back in now. So, thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. So this is a group of folks who focus specifically on the beginning farmer and rancher support in the network, but our full Farming for the Future working group has got folks doing land access and farm viability and climate and ag issues. So it's a big group of folks, and I added you to that listserv. It's a great place to share out opportunities and hear and learn from others. And yeah, we get together every once in a while and in person and collaborate on stuff. So yeah, welcome. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Andrew.
Anything else folks got exciting going on?
I can chime in, Andrew.
Cool.
Well, you all probably know this, but I'll just say it again. We have applications open for our apprenticeship programs with host farms around the state. They're closing on March 15th. We also have applications for the Beginning Farmer Educational Event Series. It goes April through October, and that's for folks who have some kind of farm experience going on, typically either concurrently or they have in the recent past, or they have a piece of land that they are not but maybe they don't have a lot of farm experience themselves, but they want to. Those classes can be really good fits for them. That application also closes March 15th. And then in the Rogue Valley specifically, we also have our Regenerative Farming Fellowship, which is more of a part-time hands-on opportunity directly with OFC staff, as well as a partner farm organization. And then one more thing I'll mention is that we have our farm funding panel on March 18th. So I'll start probably sending outreach about that to the lists and everything. You'll see that soon, but it's going to be on Zoom in the evening, Spanish interpretation provided.
Nice.
Thanks, Matt. So we're continuing planning for Small Farm School. It's going to be on Wednesday, September 16th at Clackamas Community College in Oregon City. And if any of you are interested in, doing a session or have ideas for sessions that you hear from farmers that you're working with, you can send them my way. We've just started that brainstorm of sessions to start off with.
And we'll see a bunch of folks this weekend.
Oh yeah, it's 2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great lineup. I was pretty impressed with the Small Farms Conference this year. There's a lot of good stuff.
Be sure you make it to the opening.
You got something
to
fun
the
planned?
opening.
You got a circus thing going on?
There's something special.
Okay, it's important to know.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. All right, y'all. Thanks for taking the time to be here and giving Nick some audience members. We have it recorded and it's hard to take time out of your day to do this. So I appreciate y'all taking the time to make sure that there's folks here to warrant taking someone like Nick's time. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that was super helpful. I like thinking about these opportunities for us to strengthen our understanding and ground this. So thank you for organizing.
Yeah, and hopefully maybe that spring announcement for BFRDP is true, and we can do some coordinating on that.